Star Wars is no stranger to villains. Yes, we're getting right into the meat and potatoes here. You know what playlist this is for, and I want to get this done as quickly as I can before I fade even more into irrelevancy. I gotta cover one villainous scene and every part of my brain is screaming Star Wars, so let's take the plunge and talk about Darth Maul. As I said earlier, Star Wars is a franchise permeated with iconic villains, from the force of rage and regret that is Darth Vader to the cruel and calculating machinations of the Emperor. Boiled down to its most basic form, Star Wars is about the conflict between the light and the dark and what makes up each of those sides. It sounds kinda silly when you describe Star Wars as light and dark, good and evil motif with the implication that it is in any way deep. But simple as it may be, it is not lacking in substance. The light side is driven by compassion, patience and restraint, whereas the dark side in direct opposition is fueled by greed, rage and manipulation. Ultimately, Star Wars warns of the danger of letting negative emotions cloud your judgment and how the slightest dip into the dark side could lead to a person losing everything they once held dear during the pursuit of greed or revenge. I know what I'm saying comes across as incredibly irrelevant, but I assure you, this is all just to lay the groundwork for my chosen scene. If Star Wars is about the conflict between good and evil and the how and the why behind why those sides are taken, it stands to reason there are plenty of characters that exemplify this conflict, and in no character is the nature of the dark side explored more interestingly than in Darth Maul. If your only exposure to the characters from the movies, then no doubt you're going to think my bringing him up is stupid, as all the fucker does in the movies is look Phantom Menacing, say 3 lines, kills Liam Neeson and then dies. Maul, in the context of his introduction, is a pretty bland and nothing character whose only purpose is to be a prop that propels key events into motion. And if you're savvy, you'll know where I'm going with this. Maul was put into Clone Wars, that much is common knowledge, and he's one of the best characters in that whole series. On paper, the idea of bringing back a character who got cut in half and fell down a ridiculously high fall seems like a huge leap in logic that was motivated mostly by fan service, and it was. But the writers lent into Maul's place in the Star Wars franchise and the motivation behind bringing him back and made all of that a part of his character. The backstory given to Maul in the Clone Wars was that when he was young, he was essentially stolen by Sidious and forced into the dark side. He had no choice in any of it. He was ripped away from his family, his planet, and even his name. Broken down and rebuilt into nothing more than a tool for his master, and when he was defeated at the hands of the Jedi, he was left unceremoniously discarded and replaced. When we see Maul for the first time in Clone Wars, he's driven only by hate, fear and rage, a mindless animal repeating the doctrine he was forced to obey all his life and consumed with one singular focus.
Revenge. I must have revenge.
And if you're expecting me to continue with the rest of Maul's story, I'm sorry to say, but we've essentially hit a roadblock here. Because Maul's fatal flaw is that he can't move on. Like the reason he was brought back, Maul cannot die, not because he is particularly important, but because he's never changing. If you stretch what is shown in the Phantom Menace, Maul is nothing more than an agent of the Sith driven by hatred. Maul, across all his appearances, apart from his death, keeps that going. He's Sisyphus, a being doomed to perform the same act day in, day out, never changing and never learning no matter what happens. Instead of being stuck trying to push a boulder up a hill, Maul is stuck in trying to get revenge, to try and achieve power. The same things he's been after since he was forced into the dark side. Throughout the entire franchise, it's shown that the way of the Sith is to never move on. Darth Vader's entire character is motivated through being in a perpetual state of grief that he's as trapped in as the suit he wears. The dark side is greed, it's the compulsion to never be content. After his resurrection, Maul could have left everything behind and started fresh. He's thought to be dead, he is in no danger of being hunted by anyone. He no longer has any ties to the Sith who imprisoned him, he's now free, and he's reunited with his family. Maul at this point could have refused the idea of revenge and lived out the rest of his life in freedom, but he didn't. He wanted more, he craved the death of the one who crippled him, and he craved power. I think it's obvious at this point that I care more about analysing the character than I do any one particular scene, but there's one specific bit in Clone Wars that highlights Maul as a villain.
You should have chosen the dark side, Master Jedi.
Maul was forced into his position as a Sith. The decision was never his, as Obi-Wan points out. The Sith as an order operate based off their own selfish nature. 2 members, a master and an apprentice. One to pass on the knowledge and the other to hunger for the power of the master. It's a selfish and greedy tradition that encompasses the very nature of the dark side. Maul's perception of dealing with his rage and hatred has become warped as a result, as he was taught to inflict and transfer his pain rather than deal with it, which is what he tries to do with Obi-Wan in that scene. But ultimately, Maul fails. He loses his empire, loses his brother, and loses literally everything he worked for. Years in the future, Maul is stuck in a dark cave on the pursuit for more power to get that all-important revenge. And when Maul finally gets to the point he had been waiting like 30 years for, his unwillingness to learn gets him fucking killed. Darth Maul as a villain in Star Wars is a symbol for the dangers of the dark side. Maul has his cool moments, but end of the day he's a pathetic and tragic character, being so overcome by his impulses that he is unable to pass on. I think Darth Maul is a cool villain not because he looks neat and has a fun lightsaber, but because of his tragedy and how he shapes the characters around him. Maul, like any villain, is destined to fail, and he's destined to only serve as an instrument for somebody else's goals or development. He could have been so much more if he didn't let greed, violence, and revenge dictate where he directed his focus. So, yeah. Thank you to Nando V Movies for including me on this playlist. It was cool to have an opportunity to talk about one of my favourite characters and hopefully reach a new audience. If you're new, stick around for more uploads or join my Discord server, or follow me on Twitter. Thank you for your time, tell me what you think in the comments, see ya.